what I want to do is go through the land trust and how it all comes together. So what is a land trust, and why would you ever consider using it? You see, a land trust is it's a document, okay, that's not registered with the Secretary of State. It's not registered anywhere. It's a common law trust is one way to refer to this type of entity. Now, some states have enacted statutes that recognize the land trust, but by and large, most states do not. And so we often refer to the land trust as a grantor trust. And we do that because the person that's setting it up is a grantor. That is, if I created a trust, it's a grantor trust. I'm the one creating it. I'm typically going to be the beneficiary of that trust as well. So how does this trust come about? What does it take to create one? Really, it's quite simple. All you need to do is draft a trust agreement. And that agreement, I've read land trusts that are a page long, and I've seen land trusts that, like what we put together, that could be upwards of 30 or 40 pages in length. But you just need to get the essential provisions in there in order to create a document like this. And so essentially what you need is you need to have a trustee of your trust. And that can be an individual, can be an entity that's going to be the trustee. Oh, I see that I don't have my iPad up here. You could have a individual or like I said, an LLC as a trustee. Okay, so here's an LLC. And so the trustee is going to be one position. And then down here, you're going to have the beneficiaries. Now, the beneficiaries initially, when you're setting up a land trust, are going to be the property owners. So if I own a house and I intend to place this into a land trust, then I would be the initial beneficiary. And the reason why we oftentimes set up our trusts with the property owner right here as the beneficiary of the trust is because when you deed the property into the trust, a county may ask to see a copy of the trust agreement. And the reason they do that is because they want to verify that it's not going to be a taxable transfer. And so we have to turn this over. California is a great example of that, where if you transfer title into a land trust, the assessor's office will then ask us for a copy of the trust agreement. And what they're looking for is to ensure that the beneficiary is also the owner of the property, that these two are the same parties. Now, not all states do this, but oftentimes this is how we'll go about creating the trust, just to ensure that that doesn't come about. So anyways, you create this trust and you put it together, and you get your trustee and you got your beneficiary set up. And the terms of the trust are going to govern how those assets are being held for the benefit of the beneficiaries. So one of the primary reasons why individuals like to use land trusts is for privacy. And so when you're setting up the trust and you're naming the trustee, let's say we call this the Green Frog Trust here. All right, so if I wanted to transfer property from Dave into the Green Frog Trust, I'm going to transfer it to the trustee of the Green Frog Trust. We're just not going to say, Dave hereby grants the following real estate to the Green Frog Trust. It's actually going to go in to the name of the trustee. So if you want anonymity for a land trust so that when somebody looks at title, they're not going to see your name listed on that trust. And of course, that's a benefit right there. If somebody's looking up title, they no longer see your name, they'll assume that you don't own it. But where people can screw this up is they think that the trustee is some uber magical provision inside of a trust, because we've heard about trust before where the trustee controls everything and you want to be in control. Well, the problem is that when you're setting up the trust in this manner, if your name's on there and you transfer the real estate into your name as trustee, people are going to know it's you. And so what we recommend is that you use a nominee trustee as your trustee, which means you use a third party or maybe even use your own limited liability company. And so that concern that many people have about transferring real estate into the name of a trustee. So for example, if we set up a trust that said Clint, trustee of Green Frog Trust, for example. Let's say we did something like that. Well, if I set that type of trust up and I told Dave, hey, transfer the property into Clint as trustee of the Green Frog Trust, Dave's going to assume, well, Clint, you're going to kick me out of the property. You could rent the property out, collect the rents. You could live in the property. Well, that's not That's not the way it works, because when we create the trust, I won't have any control over that trust agreement as its trustee. And that's why it gives people the confidence many times when they're setting these things up. If they want to use a third party like myself or another attorney, you no longer have that concern that they're going to be able to step in and do things for do things to your property, because all the powers regarding the property itself are in the hands of the beneficiary. So you write this up like a contract. For example, if I was going to buy your property from you and I specified in the real estate purchase and sale agreement that you needed to do X, Y, and Z, right? Well, then in order for that deal to go through, I expect the seller to fix this and replace part of the siding on the east side of the house. Those things all are necessary. We contract for those. Well, the same thing with a land trust. It's essentially a contract. And when you're putting it together, the trustee is given certain powers under the trust agreement. And whatever powers the trustee is not given, the remaining powers sit down here with the beneficiary. And that's where Dave is. So when you're setting up a land trust, what I'm explaining to you is that you can use a nominee trustee. So when title gets taken, you'll show up in the chain of title as Dave initially, but then it'll show up as Clint Coons, trustee of this trust going forwards. And so if somebody's looking up Dave's name, they won't see that Dave's the current owner of this property. And if they look at the property itself, they'll see that Clint, as trustee of the trust, is the current owner. And so they think that I'm somehow the owner of this property through the trust. But the reality is Dave is that owner. And the reason why people can't figure this out is because the trust document itself is not recorded anywhere. The trust is not set up with the Secretary of State, so you have to disclose any information. It's a private document. The only way you know this trust even exists is because title to the property is held in that trust name. So once that's done and it's created, if you're using a nominee trustee, then that nominee trustee shall resign their position. And when they resign, again, this all happens behind the scenes, then Dave steps in as the new trustee. So if you wanted to do this and you wanted to create a land trust and deed your property into the name of the trustee and set all of this stuff up, then you want to make sure that when that trustee resigns, if you're using a nominee trustee, that the trustee provides you what is termed a trustee's deed. Now, this is where I've seen a lot of real estate investors run into problems. They set up a land trust and they use a third party as their trustee. The trustee resigns and appoints them the beneficiary, but nothing gets recorded, all right? Because if you recorded the fact that I resigned and Dave's now the trustee of the trust, then that just kind of blows all the anonymity there. So what we want to do is give a trustee's deed from Clint to Dave. And so it's an actual deed form that I would complete. And it says Dave's now the trustee of the trust. Why would I do that? Because if Dave ever needs to refinance a property, wants to sell the property, he's going to have a hard time selling property in a trust where he's not listed as a trustee. Now, he can eventually probably get it done, but it's so much simpler if he has a trustee's deed in his hand from the resigning trustee that he can take and record at any time. So all he has to do is go down, record the document, and he's good to go. His name will now appear there, so he has apparent authority over that trust to take any action. So that's one way the trusts are set up with Dave as trustee. The other thing that people use is a limited liability company. We've been doing a lot of this lately where we'll set up a Wyoming LLC as the trustee of the trust. So you don't have to use myself or a third party. You have your own LLC set up. And when the LLC is set up in Wyoming, remember your name doesn't appear anywhere on that Wyoming limited liability company. New Mexico is another state that people use. You're completely anonymous. So we just list the LLC name now down as trustee. And then you don't have to go through this trustee resignation stuff that you would if you're using a nominee trustee. So you have two options. If you want privacy with your land trust, appoint someone that you know, trust, or is a professional, an attorney, as your initial trustee, have them resign, and then you step in as the successor trustee, no one knows. Or you should use a limited liability company in Wyoming or New Mexico or some state that doesn't collect any information on you. So if somebody looked up the trustee LLC, your information is not associated with it.